Good evening. Good evening, well, good afternoon and good morning, wherever you might be joining us from. Thank you so much for dialing in to yet another impactful leader episode. We are happy to be back with you again. I know that there has been a minute since our last session, but we are just excited to be back here again and have a new guest with us here today. In terms of the format, it will be as ever, we'll have a discussion, but at the same time, we are very, very keen of involving all of you in the discussion as well and learning from you just as much as we are sharing with you. So the chat is open, it will be open, it will be monitored throughout the session. So please drop us a hello, just so we know that you are with us, that you can hear us and you can see us. Let us know where you might be dialing in from. And in the meanwhile, we will just do quick rounds of introductions for those who might not know us. Faris is obviously a new guest here today. And, for those who might not know him, I'm very, very excited for you to meet him, because he definitely is also a powerhouse to be reckoned with in this topic as well. So, as ever, my name is Baiba, Žiga, and I'm the founder of Impulsum, working very closely with Csaba on measuring and optimizing workplace cultures, team dynamics, and leadership practices. And so when it comes to change management, change leadership, those are absolute fundamental pieces to our work. So this is a topic very, very close to our heart. But Csaba, I didn't mean to introduce you as well, so I'll vacate the stage a little bit and you've got it.
I'm really good with that, you know that. My name is Csaba. I'm the founder of ICQ Global, the leading experts in measuring and optimizing psychological safety, motivational drivers, and cognitive diversity. The three invisible forces that make or break a team, and that's why it makes sense to be able to understand this topic. So I'm really happy to join by Faris, and I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. Faris, jump in.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I've been holding my tongue back. It's a real pleasure to join you, Baiba and Csaba. My name is Faris Aranki. I'm the founder of a company called Žiga Consulting, which is all about strategic effectiveness. I'm a reform strategy consultant who saw the light that you need to involve people and get people working better together to unlock your strategic success. So that's what we do nowadays. And I use a lot of techniques that I've learned, not just from my consulting career, but I started off as a secondary school teacher. So a lot of great techniques that work on kids. Do you know what? They work on adults as well. So everybody hates change. Everybody hates these things, unless they're getting a brand new iPhone, then they love change. So it's all about, working with teams to make them work better. And I'm very much looking forward to today's conversation.
Love that. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. And hence I'm so also fascinated and interested in your background, in teaching and then coming, into these spaces and working with leaders. I can imagine you're coming with bags of interesting strategies of how to engage people in these spaces as well. So I'm, even more excited about today's conversation, and I'm going to be making notes. Because I think, often we are overcomplicating our conversations and our engagements with people just because they carry big titles. But we have to remember that we are engaging with people, and hence today's conversation in the context of change management, because last time we had our guest Dr. Sandra Upton, and we talked about kind of like differences between change management and change leadership, and why it is so important to kind of like start to make that mindset and behavioral change between these two, not just concepts and ideologies, but also on a very, very practical level. And so since change is a very broad topic, and there are so many different ways and lenses that we can look at it, we wanted to bring it back to the table and kind of like flesh it out even more. And this time around, we will delve into the the critical and often elusive aspect of organizational success and change, which is securing buy-in and commitment from senior leaders. And we wanted to add the kind of layer of what is the role of emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence in that process, just to create a kind of more nuanced understanding of the topic. Because again, you know, when it comes to change, I think we often go about it in a very rational and very logical manner. However, we are dealing with people, and when it comes to change, there is a lot of emotions, there's a lot of behavioral pieces, there's a lot of fight or flight involved in there, and we do really have to, you know, recognize that and really, I would say, humanize change. As much as processes and as much as phases and milestones are important and helpful, I think we really do need to humanize change. And so without further ado, I would love to get into the topic with all of you. I just wanted to set a little bit of a scene in terms of what we're going to be talking about, and people are pulling up. We have people from Portugal and the US and the UK. So thank you so much all for being here. It really is a pleasure. And as I said earlier, as much as we're going to be sharing, as much as we're going to be asking each other, you know, questions and learning from each other, we also want to really engage you in this conversation, because I know that many of you who are here today are either practitioners, change management, change leadership practitioners. So we would love to hear your perspectives on some of the things that we are discussing. But at the same time, maybe some of you are going through change within your organizations right now. So again, if there are any reflections or any lived experiences you want to share, we would love to hear those as well. So once again, the chat will be open and monitored throughout the session. So please talk to us, so to say. And so without further ado, I will go into the topic, but kind of like before we get into the nitty-gritty parts of it, I really want to start where we start, you know, always. Why this topic and why now? Why is it important to talk about not just change management, but also kind of like apply that emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence lens on top of that as well? Faris, would you like to go?
Yeah. Hey, look, I think emotional intelligence has been important throughout all of history, right? I'm sure the cavemen could have done with more emotional intelligence, right? But nowadays it's even more relevant because it's part of our lexicon. It's part of our language, right? We are aware that just being robotic, just using logic, telling people what to do isn't enough, right? We've gone through so many experiences as a human society recently, the pandemic, you know, all the things that are going on globally at the moment, that if we'd be foolish not to think about the emotional side of all the big decisions and all the things we're trying to do. And I think it is more legitimate to talk about it now than it was in previous times. So that's why I think it's so relevant. That's why I set up a whole business around emotional intelligence. But you know what? People still struggle. People still find it a difficult conversation. So it's even more relevant for people like us to go out there, lead the way on the conversation, and actually say, look, it's okay. And here's some practical tips for how you can be better at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Csaba, do you have any additional thoughts on this?
I guess you're waiting for some controversial answers, but no, of
Always.
course, it's always politically correct, but sometimes too straightforward. You know, So you're back now. So last time we talked about change leadership, and we said that change is constant, change is happening. So every single leader has to master it because they're already doing it. So, you know, even though change sounds really scary, at the same time, we have much more experience than we realize. And I think that is comforting. Change is happening. Now, the question is, how fast is it? And how much are you in control? Because at the end of the day, people are craving certainty. So how do you associate change with, for example, certainty or uncertainty? Because, you know, the brain would push back immediately. Because if it's not familiar, if it's not predictable, then it's dangerous. That's why the brain is trying to keep us in the comfort zone, because it's a fantastic place. But that is the paradox of change. I try to protect the status quo. I try to protect what I have now, by not changing it, but the world doesn't really care about it because it's changing more rapidly than ever before. So the gap between us, what we are trying to protect, and the world is getting bigger and bigger until we get to that breaking point, and then it's horrible. That's a radical change, and that is not pleasant. Nobody likes it. So it makes much more sense to walk every day a little bit so you don't have to run tomorrow. And once we get that right and we are intentional about it, and change turns into transitioning, we know the starting point and also kind of we know where we want to get to, then at least we have this illusion of control that we do something about it. And then we like it. Because at the end of the day, the more flexible you are, the more you grow, the more you become, the safer you are. And that's a positive thing. Having said that, the brain doesn't know the difference between running away from pain or discomfort. But that's why smart people should use emotional intelligence. So we can reframe it and we can turn something uncomfortable into something positive, even though it can be unpleasant.
Yeah, and it very much I think goes back to our conversation last time as well. Talking about kind of the ideology or mindset rather about how we even think about change. And you were talking about doing change a little bit every single day, and it's kind of I think we live in a world and we all the time we say that change characterizes the change and pains is the only constant that we have right now. We say that a lot, and last time I shared a piece of statistic that in the I think global reinvention survey, this is from 2018, so it is a little bit of a while back. So actually the statistic is probably even higher now, but 47% of business owners said that they have to reinvent their business at least once every 3 years just to survive. And I think that is a testimony that just highlights at what pace we are operating these days, and that we go through a number of organizational changes within a relatively short window. And so we can't anymore just react on change anymore. We can't just do, okay, now there is change, let's put some processes in and let's manage it as a project. And hence there comes in this change leadership, where we are starting to build skills, or we need to start building skills where we can accept change as a neighbor who's here with us all the time, and instead of kind of like attacking it in one big piece, we can start chipping away from it on every single day basis. But that requires skill. It requires skill. It is not something that comes automatic or natural to us, and hence kind of like the lenses again of EQ and CQ comes in because they hold immense value, and they hold immense amount of skill set that we need to work on. And so, and speaking about leaders and leadership buy-in, and from that point of view, why this topic and why now, I think it is also very important to understand that in the change process, whatever that looks like, leaders can't just acknowledge change, accept change, or sponsor change. They really need to take a proactive stance, and they really need to take full onus of the change and really lead from front and really lead by example all the time. And I think that is also one of the parts that requires a bit of a mindset change, I would say.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Baiba. I really liked what you said, right? And it's something I believe is that change is a constant, right? It shouldn't be looked at as a specific one-off project. It is business as usual. And the best leaders that I work with, they don't talk about change. They talk about, leadership, inclusivity. I'd love to hear what you think about this topic. I'd love to, because every day, a new tool comes along, a new team member comes in, we change roles, we change the supplier who does our lunch. All of these are change, right? And some we don't even think about, and others we adopt to. So yeah, it shouldn't be a one-off. It should be something you're doing every day through great leadership, just in general.
Well, that's also the question. If it's that important, if it's that urgent, why is it so difficult to get the buy-in from the people who are responsible for the success of the company? The ones who should be protecting it and future-proofing it.
Well, I mean, they're human beings, aren't they, Csaba? Right? So you know what you know what they say about leaders. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. A lot of us forget that they are human beings, right? They go, well, they're the leaders, so they should just get on with it. But they have their own emotional journey, right? They might be just having a crap day, right? They might have shit going on, pardon my language, at home, right? Or they might, you know, the actual change program, they might not agree with it, right? So, but they've still got to come out the front and go, yeah, this is amazing, this is awesome. So we often forget that about leaders, you know, that just like anyone else, just like when I joked at the beginning, hey, we all love a new iPhone or we love getting a PlayStation 5. That's change, but we love it. But we hate when the boss tells us, you know, we've got to do a new SAP system. We're like, oh God, I can't be bothered. And that is just how human beings, some things we love and we go all in and we don't think about it as change. Other things we go, oh my God, this is going to be an effort. This is going to put me out of a job. This is going to mean I'm going to have to do this differently. And that's just, you know, as you said, going back to your brain, doesn't know the difference between a good thing and a bad thing. It floods it with the same adrenaline, the same things. And it's really about how we respond to it.
Really, I think really interesting points. You know, both of you have raised in terms of how our brain works, and I really, you know, enjoyed, you know, Faris, what you were saying, that, you know, change happens, you know, all the time, and it was, you know, such a simple thing that you said, but absolutely, you know, change happens all the time, and there are these little pieces of change that we don't even notice, and yet there are other changes that we make a big deal about, and actually sometimes they're not even, you know, proportionate in terms of, you know, their weight. And so also kind of like in change programs, I think that is also very, very true, where there will be a demographic or mass of people who will be ever so excited about, you know, whatever the piece of change is. It could be as trivial as you said, you know, catering supplier change within, you know, a building or whatnot, a catering supplier, and then others will be absolutely like, I'm leaving this place, right? And you know, kind of like chucking the, you know, all of their toys out. So it's also about perception, and I think this also shows how important it is to humanize change and to really work and not go through change through process, but really think about people who will be receiving that change, and not just talk at their titles, but really consider the person. Again, you know, going back to your example about, you know, they put pants on the same way as, you know, all of us do, regardless of, you know, what titles they hold. So again, it comes back to, we are delivering something for people. It's people delivering something for people. And you know, and again, we come back to, I think, the central theme of that emotional cultural intelligence. I also feel, and maybe, you know, let me build up upon your question, you know, Faris and Csaba, the both of you asked, you know, why is this happening? Why is this so hard? You know, what are, in your view and in your experience, what are some of the key, most common barriers that senior leaders face when considering new initiatives or new changes? What have you observed in your work?
I mean, I've observed a lot of things, right? And I'd say it falls on two sides, really. They underestimate how they themselves are going to be impacted and how they're going to feel on the journey. You know, because a lot of senior people, going back to what we said, they go, I am senior, I better be the person, I better love this, right? Even though they might not, right? But their initial reaction is, oh, I'll be fine. So they don't accommodate for their own emotional journey. And then the flip side is they don't think through every aspect of their teams or the people around them, the journey they'll be going through, either because they don't know them well enough or they don't break it down enough, right? It's not as simple as say, well, Baiba, she'll be fine with change and Csaba won't, right? Some leaders I see do that too simplistically because there's so many different aspects of change. And I tend to break it down into 4 components, right? You know, is the person going to have difficulty getting over the doorstep, even accepting the change? So that's the first step. The second one is, are they going to have difficulty upskilling themselves for the change, which is a different challenge? And the third one is, are they going to have difficulty maintaining the effort to keep going with the change, right? And the fourth one is, are they going to get improvement from the change, right? And so if you want a nice example, it's like going to the gym, right? I don't know about you. I always hate going to the gym when I'm sat at home. So the hardest bit is crossing the doorstep, going to the gym. That's the first bit of change motivation. The second bit is when I get to the gym, I don't know how to use the equipment. So I could easily just walk out the door. And so I need support. How do I use the equipment? Then the third part is I'm not seeing any results. So I need some support to give me the encouragement to help me get the results. And then the fourth one is I need support to keep going to the gym on my own without somebody being there for the motivation, right? And I don't see leaders breaking it down into different parts enough. They just label people as good with change or not good with change, whereas they might be good with some parts of it, but not all of it. So it's their own journey and not really thinking it through to the micro detail for each member of their team. That's my opinion. What do you think, Csaba?
What I noticed, and I've got a really recent example as well, that often people talk about embracing reality, but in reality they are just fueling illusion, because embracing reality means that you have to look at the facts, because if it's not clear where you start, it's very difficult to plan a journey. And just like Kurt Lewin said it even in the 1940s, that there's no organizational change without psychological safety. You cannot unfreeze an organization. If they don't feel safe and motivated enough, then the change is not going to be sustainable. You can force behavior change, but that's not enough. So, for example, this week we had a debrief to a company. It's a big company, senior leaders, and we measured the team dynamics, the biomarkers of high performance, psychological safety and motivation. We started off nicely. We are open to change. There's always room for improvement. And then we displayed the results. Immediately the pushback. No, that's not valid. No, I think we should dismiss those people who are outliers. No, they are not in the growth zone. We've been together for 10 years. If that was true, they wouldn't be here by now. I said, wow, that's a lot. So what is the message that you are sending now? What do you think? What is the example that you're showing? People can speak up. Can they ask for help? Can they be honest? Can they be vulnerable? Not really. No. How's that going to affect change? And if there's no buy-in from the senior leaders, there's a problem. Because I think often change, the way you see change, depends on the amount of effort you have to put into it. Because it can be positive, but if it takes too much effort, then quickly it turns into something negative. Just because I want it, it doesn't mean that I can make it work. Often that's the problem. So it's too much hassle. And the other problem that I've noticed is that sometimes people are too extreme. What you mentioned, that they are binary, or they are really rigid, and this is what we do, and that's the process, and you follow it. That's why you get paid. If you don't like it, off you go. Or they become too inclusive. And ultimately, they look weak, because at the end of the day, change means pressure and stress and more uncertainty. And often people under pressure outsource their power. They look for an authority figure. They look for guidance. And if you don't get it from the leaders, because they are way too inclusive, it can create even more uncertainty. So we just have to find that balance. First, diagnosing it, how the team is feeling. How can we improve that? And based on that, we know the best methodology.
And I will build upon that as well to say that I totally agree with that the business intelligence in this context needs to play, a huge part. And when I say that word business intelligence a little bit loosely, because I feel that within our organizations, we are great with, risk assessments and risk management. And we know when it comes to project management or change management for that matter, we have Excel sheets on top of Excel sheets and templates on top of templates with different risk management profiles and different reports that we are sending out, budget management, and all of the stuff that we could kind of like class as business intelligence. However, if we consider and if we assume it to be true that people are the central aspect of change process, that we also need to have business intelligence on people. And from my experience, I feel that we are globally very lousy in business intelligence on people. We invest money in that, but there is very little robust monitoring on an ongoing basis about what is really happening within our employee demographic. And I'm not talking about your surface level once a quarter employee engagement pulse surveys. I'm talking about real intelligence on our people and our ability to monitor and really work with that on an ongoing basis, not just do a pulse survey, close the book, see you in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And so kind of like from diagnosing point of view, I think that is such a key thing that we are, building, not just, data for the business case and whatnot. It is important, we do need that to justify investments and bring people on the journey and also for the buy-in, the very topic that we are talking about, but also on an ongoing basis, because I think that also would make our organizations much more resilient, and we wouldn't have to scatter for data in these business cases every time change happens to us, but we would already have that data. We would have much more fluid understanding of our organizations on a kind of like much deeper level rather than a temperature check at that very, very moment. So from diagnosing point of view, I couldn't agree more. And again, going back to, in terms of kind of like the barriers, going back to, what I was talking about earlier is, again, that mindset. I think within our organizations, again, we have a lot of managers and not enough leaders. And when we, think about what the mandate of a manager is, it very much is to minimize risk and to ensure that the systems that we have within our business are robust. And, we kind of like maintain the status quo in many ways. But then when it comes to change, then change, by definition is about creating a new system and kind of like, breaking that status quo, in some way, or disrupting it in some way. And so I think that there is also a bit of tension, therefore, that happens between the mindset of a manager and the mandate of a manager, I would say, and what change actually holds within itself.
I would add one thing, because you mentioned the diagnosis and that people love business intelligence. And I know that lots of people have, fetish for numbers, which is great. But I don't know who said it exactly, but, if you torture big data long enough, it can confess anything you want. So, data can be misleading. That's the problem with that, because statistically, the basketball players are the tallest ones. So if you want your kids to be tall, let them play basketball. It sounds logical, but it's not really efficient. It's not going to happen. That's the problem with that. It depends on what you measure. And for example, if you ask the companies if the leadership program they invest in, is that really good? Yeah, of course. But according to the MIT Sloan Management Review, yes, they are entertaining. Yes, they provide a lot of information, but most of them are not valuable because they don't measure the impact on the people who matter the most. So they had the number. It looks scientific, but it wasn't the right type of business intelligence. And if you don't have the right data, you make the wrong decision. That's the challenge with that.
And we've just got a comment from Shane as well, saying that he's hearing that change either happens to you, or you lead it, or you lead through it. Thank you for that comment, Shane. Did you have any thoughts on that, or did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we should, comment. Shane has shared something with us, so I think it's great to comment, and I wholeheartedly agree, Shane. Right? I believe all of life is about change. Right? It's about going through the Kubler-Ross curve. If you don't know that, go and look it up. It's the 7 stages of any change. You get from denial to bargaining and anger to excitement, the other side. Right? And because I believe this, and you as a leader, you are defined by how quickly you can get through that curve and take others through it. So because I believe this about myself, I'm the kind of idiot who constantly introduces change into my life. Everything. I change my toothpaste. I change my brand of toilet paper. I change how I walk home every day. Every month I pick a different challenge just to take me out of my comfort zone. So I have to get through change, because I believe that will help me when the bigger changes come around the world. Come and hit. So you brush your left hand, even though the more you embrace change, the better you'll be as a leader, the better you'll be in life, is my view. So Shane, I think you've got a great comment.
I think there's also something really revealing in the name itself, because if you look at the change curve, it's exactly the same as the stages of grieving or culture shock. It's exactly the same process. And that says a lot about change.
Yeah.
If you know what's happening and it's intentional, then it's much easier to manage our expectation. If it's not intentional and we have no idea what's going on, where it leads to, that's terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And Vaso said it nicely. If you don't change, life will change you, right? So, you know, one of my mantras is run towards the wrecking ball, not away from it. But I appreciate not everyone looks at life that way.
Well, I think there probably is a reason why you have created a business within this space, because otherwise, you know, if you were, as you said, you know, not running towards it but away from it, I think it would be very painful to work in this. In these topics.
Completely, but I just wanted to acknowledge something that both you and Csaba said about you know, assessment data. It is a really important point. Right, I like the story that told, and I see it so many times where leaders just say there isn't a problem. Right, you need leaders who are open to hearing stuff that they might not want to hear, and there are many leaders, and Donald Trump is a classic example. Even if you came with a great assessment, you know, they'd say, well, those are your facts, they're not my facts. You know, and I've got lots of similar stories to Csaba where I presented to a senior team about something shocking in their business, and heard somebody sit opposite me going, that's not my company. I don't know where you got that data. I don't know where you heard those stories. That's not my company. Literally, it's like a child putting their fingers in there. And you're like, you're a senior leader and you're not willing to listen to this. Of course, this company is not going to change in the right way. So it's a really difficult thing, even with data sometimes, to get people to even listen.
I think it makes it even more difficult because, for example, this week, another comment we got from the same group, one of the senior leaders, is that if you had brought this kind of assessment 5 years ago, we would have fired the trainer and the HR person. I said, look at that bully. That's fantastic. No wonder you got this result.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about, again, data, just to build up on what you've said, is that it can be really, really threatening for, you know, not necessarily to the organization, but to individuals. They, again, you know, go into this you know, denial and defensive kind of like state. And the other, I think, flip side of it as well is that often data can be weaponized to execute very certain agendas that, again, you know, these people might have, these, you know, leaders might have. So as valuable as data is, you know, to Csaba's point, whether we are even measuring the right things and we're talking about the right things, then we can measure whatever we want and we can, you know, torture data as much as we want. But if there are no you know, people with enough resilience and courage to even have a conversation about those findings, because data on its own is just, you know, data, it's chaos. It's actually when we start bringing, you know, stories around it and really contextualize it, is when we really make it real. But that requires courage. It requires emotional intelligence. It requires, you know, cultural intelligence. And so as we are moving into the cultural and emotional intelligence, I am quite curious, you know, from both of your point of view, how does emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence influence the way we approach change? Or rather, maybe let me rephrase that question. What is the role of emotional and cultural intelligence in change? Maybe that's a better question.
Well, yeah, I think it plays a big aspect, right? If everything we've talked about is, you know, emotional intelligence has two levels. Is how do you manage your own emotions, and are you aware of your own emotions? And then how do you influence other people's emotions, and are you aware of the emotions they're going through? So let's start with the self. Right? If you lack emotional intelligence, like those stories that we just heard about the leaders who put their fingers in their ears, they're not even aware they're doing it. They're not even aware they're resisting. In their head, they're like, I'm being very reasonable. I'm addressing this. So they're not even, you know, it takes somebody to have emotional intelligence say, do you know what? I'm not comfortable with this. I'm hearing something and my initial reaction is to be defensive, to sort of go above them. So, you know, it really, you know, a big part is the self. Are they aware, and how do they manage their own emotions and be honest about them? And then the second part is really thinking through, as I said, what are the people around me going through? Can I really understand? Are they happy about this? You know, are they sad about it? Why are they putting up the resistance they're putting up? You know, let me, and then you know, the final component is, what can I do to help with that? So for me, it's, yeah, it's crucial, and you can call it emotional intelligence, you can call it whatever you like. That's why I say it's just part of being a good leader and being more inclusive.
It's a very positive approach.
I'm a very positive person, Csaba.
Because my experience is that, you know, when it comes to leaders, for example, if the individual interest, if the desire to protect your individual comfort is greater than the need to look after your team, to future-proof the business, then they are going to resist. And if they are lacking that kind of emotional intelligence, lack of almost caring, then what can you expect? Nothing is going to happen, because even if the change fails, they're going to blame other people because, you know, it's not my fault. We are good. We don't have a problem. But those people, they're out of control. They are not good enough. And that kind of disconnect makes it difficult to embrace reality.
Yeah, I agree. Do you know how many conversations with clients start with, there's a problem with my team, can you come in and have a look? And then you go and talk to the team and you say, hey, what's the problem? And they point at the boss and say, there's the problem. He's not even aware he's the problem.
Yeah.
Right? So you're absolutely right. Does it mean not going to work with them? Hell no. It's going to be more challenging, right? But I always tongue in cheek say, and you know, I make up these statistics, but I say only 10% of people want to change or are aware they need to change. The other 90% have to, and that's just fine, because we'll get a way to change them, often without them realizing, because human beings are great, right? Just as much as we resist stuff, other things we do willingly. And if you can work out what our motivators are, yeah, then we will happily follow you into battle. So that's why I'm a positive person, because for every negative, there's a positive. Positives, negatives, and there you go. You've got.
I agree with that, and I think that's also true. But people will follow you if they feel that you have their best interest at heart.
Yes.
And if my own discomfort is preventing me from helping them and looking after them, then clearly I'm not a good leader. And it shouldn't matter if I want it or not. Do they need it? That should be the overriding power. It doesn't matter if, you know, if your kids are hungry, then it doesn't matter if you're tired or not. You work, you get some food. Do you want to? No, it doesn't matter. You do it for them, for the greater good. And that's the kind of leader that people want to follow. And then it's a no-brainer.
And it also makes me think about, you know, all of these like great leaders and so on in kind of like change context. We still have the hard code, sobering fact that 70% of change initiatives fail. And the other bit is that, you know, 79% of potential between people, you know, in teams is lost because people do not know how to communicate effectively with one another and bridge those interaction gaps. And so coincidence, perhaps, but perhaps there is also, you know, something to you know, for one to do with the other, considering how important, you know, transparency and and communication and resilience and openness and flexibility and all of these things are in the change process. And so, and you know, and the things that we already kind of like, you know, talked about, where, you know, change, especially culture change, requires to lean into unpleasant conversations, be able to discuss unpleasant facts and findings and data. So do we have the courage, the resilience, the flexibility to be able to do that? And also from that, you know, on the same point, I think we also, you know, back to where we started, and, you know, what Faris, where you said that, you know, everyone puts their pants on, and that analogy will stay with me. That, you know, we often treat layers of within organization, you know, layers of people within organization as a monolith. You know, we have frontline needs, we need middle manager needs, and we have senior manager needs, and they need to know this, and that layer needs to know something else, and another layer needs to know something else. And there is a level of truth to that. But again, you know, within these pools of people live various people demographics with different information processing needs, with different you know, communication and behavioral styles, regardless of what their titles are. And under pressure in kind of like this potentially, you know, fight or flight state that change sometimes can, you know, get out of us, the people between these layers are much more similar, kind of like from people point of view, than necessarily their titles would say. And so we need to communicate with people, not with their titles. And this part, I think, is what requires emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, psychological safety, and all of those, you know, things that we talk about and work with.
I mean, you mentioned that 70% of transformations fail, but if we like statistics, then more than 90% of diets fail. You know, so which one is the best one? Because there's a secret to it. The one that you can do for long enough. That's the best one. Just like in change management. Now the question is, which one can you do? And you know, that comes down to motivation. Is it easy enough? Do you want it badly enough? And also, why do you do that? Who do you do it for? I've read it in one of the books where they asked somebody, they said, so do you love your kids? And, you know, wanted a controversial example. Then says, of course, I would die for them. It's fantastic. But would you get healthy for them? No. And that's a problem. Because that's too much hassle. Jumping in front of a bullet, that's pretty quick. But giving up smoking, how dare you? That's not right. So why do you do that? And if you are a real leader, you do it for your team. You do it their future, because that's your responsibility, your obligation, and also privilege. If that is clear, it doesn't matter if I want it. They need it. We need it.
Yeah.
This also makes me think about, there was a statistic, and maybe you know the statistics better. I don't remember specific numbers, but it was high, that I think like 80 or 90% of people who have experienced a heart attack based on their lifestyle, after surviving the heart attack, within a couple of months or within kind of like a relatively short period of time, they return back to the lifestyle that got them experiencing heart attack and in this kind of like life-threatening situation in the first place. And that again, you know, shows how short our memory is and how quickly we kind of like return back to those bad habits.
If there is no hope, definitely. I mean, that's exactly because that's exactly what happened.
There is to come in with a little bit of positivity here, like.
Oh, that's right, because now we are going downhill.
It's going down. Come on, we gotta bring this back, right? Yeah, look, human beings are amazing creatures with short-term memories, and we go back to default settings. You know, if you know about the system 1, system 2 way of thinking that a human brain works, then you know we all love system 1, which is we've been doing it for years. So it takes a force of habit, unless others, you know, that's why changing the process around people often helps them. And so many things you said, I've got so many anecdotes and so many things that pop into mind about when human beings say one thing and then do something completely different. You know, almost don't take them at face value when they say they're going to do something. And I've got some fantastic examples of that. All right. So while I love people, you know, what they tell me doesn't always equate. But the other thing that really strikes from what you've said is, do you know what? I used to be a school teacher. And when I left teaching, I couldn't wait to get into business because I'd heard all about these great leaders in the business world. These amazing, and I remember the first company I joined, I was like, how many are we going to meet on day one? There must be at least 7 great leaders I'm going to meet just in the induction. Do you know what? I probably didn't even meet 3 great leaders in my 4 years at that company, because being a great leader is the hardest thing in the world, right? To think of doing everything and know, you know, so you're not going to meet a lot of great leaders. That's the reality in life. You're not going to meet some amazing human being, you know, like the best human beings. You'll meet a few in your life. So follow them, stick with them, right? But that doesn't mean we can just dismiss everything else and go back to smoking, right? Or do something. take the small good elements of each person you meet and take them as and copy them, steal them, be unashamedly. Yeah. Invest time in understanding yourself, right? Maybe you won't change to healthy for your kids, but maybe you will change if somebody pays you, right? And you realize your real motivation is money or accountability, not your kids. That's fine, right? Don't beat yourself up that you're not going to change for your kids, right? Go, great, now I understand I'm going to change for money, right? That's what's going to get me to the change, right? Because we worry too much about how we get there sometimes. Whereas if we have a simple road, just take it. Just literally take it. That's why anytime I meet someone, I am forever trying to work out their whiffins and whammies. Have you heard of this phrase, whiffim and whammy? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, whiffim stands for what's in it for me, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and a whammy is what's against my interest. Do you know what? In a half-hour conversation with a human being, if you ask the right questions, they will literally tell you their whiffins and whammies. Literally giving you a playbook to them, saying, do you know what? I like this, I don't like that. And as soon as you give it, just do the things they like, make sure you avoid the things they don't like. And that's how you'll get them to give up smoking or make the change, because they've given you the clues. And many times it's very surprising. It's not the things you think that they should be interested in, but it doesn't matter. Just take the easy road.
You have the permission to take the easy road. You all heard here first from Faris. You have the permission. Love that. And while we are talking about, you know, or rather, as we come back to talking about the buy-in, but this was important. As we're talking about the leadership buy-in, leadership commitment, I'm curious, and I'm sure people here are curious also about some, perhaps a little bit more, you know, practical suggestions, also from your experiences in this work, to what are some of the essential elements or some of the essential considerations as we, I don't want to say sell, but when it comes to getting the buy-in, what are some of the components that we need to be aware of as we go to leaders and communicate the need for change?
So as we go to leaders to try and get their buy-in, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I'm just clarify. I mean, I'm always nervous when a leader, do you know what, they call you in and they say, I need your help with this change program. And then they themselves are so bored by the change program. I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. I had this recently. I was talking to a COO of a company and he said, I need your help with the change program. I said, can you just explain to me simply what the change program is? It was an IT implementation. He took 15 minutes to explain it to me. And all the time he was talking like, and then we have to do this, and then we have to do that. And I just stopped him after 5 minutes and said, oh my God, you sound so bored. How the hell are you leading anyone when you sound bored? Like, why are you even doing this? Just stop it now, right? So I think the key is to really challenge them from the outset. Like, you know, why are you doing this? And if you're not passionate about it, if you cannot get excited, right, let's really question whether this is the right thing for you to do, right? If you should be the one leading it, right? And whether your organization, you know, let's also question whether your organization needs it, right? But because as a leader, you should be excited. You should see how it links to what you want to achieve with your business, what you want to, yeah. So I think that's a key component. And I'm unashamedly happy to bruise egos and challenge people, right? It's something that often instigates change, because I find if you just say yes to a leader all the time, you don't really get the engagement that you need. But if you piss them off or challenge their thinking, sometimes they come back to the table kind of fighting, but they embrace the change more, counterintuitively. But aside from that, I think, yeah, you know, go in, be prepared to flex. If they're a data person, go in with the facts. If they're a story person, go in with a great story. You know, if they're a relationship person, go and be their best friend, right? I think these are the tools that help us get leaders to buy into change, and anyone.
And it again takes us back to, for us, you know, having the intelligence to understand the person who is sitting in front of us, and how to then communicate that information in a way that that person will understand, which might often be not the way that we would intake the information or the way that we would process the information. And that, I think, is also, you know, a very key aspect of this conversation. Csaba.
I'm under pressure now because I have to be positive. The pressure is on. But
so we have Faris here, so we're good. We're good. We can always go to him.
Top it up a little bit, but I try to keep it positive, because when we look at change, then there are two ways of dealing with it. I mean, if you look at the perception, you can focus on the pain or the gain. And the pain is about understanding how far you are from the goal, but the gain is how much progress you made. And you know, you have to be aware of both of them. But like Tony Robbins said, that progress is happiness. So we have to measure it, which means that we do have to celebrate the small wins as well. And we also have to learn from the smaller setbacks. And that's important. So it's not about toxic positivity and also beating people around that. Let's change. That's not enough. But also, I think accurate thinking is important, because I think that people can get excited about the potential outcome, the desired outcome. But also, maybe we have to accept that the process might be less pleasant. Sometimes we have to do things that we are not excited about, we don't like. But if I know why I'm doing it, if I know that it's a stepping stone, if it takes me closer to that goal, then I can reframe that experience. But if I expect joy and excitement all the way, then we get disappointed quickly. So pain and gain, the right amount, and we can go. So positive, huh?
You saved yourself. You absolutely pulled it out of the bag.
Do you know what? I'm gonna you use the phrase toxic positivity, Csaba, and I agree with you, right? I may be a positive person, but being too positive is also a bad thing. And when it comes to change, you know, a good leader should also allow his team to moan and should join them, right? This is terrible. Yeah, this is annoying. This is, you know, use even worse language. Yeah, because too many, you know, there's this polarity model of change where too many people start with, hey, look at the bright, shiny thing. Look at all the positives of it, right? And but there's this school of thought, actually start with the old world and say, hey, what do we love about our current way of doing things, right? Oh, what are we going to miss if we were forced to change? Oh, I hate to give that up, right? So get people to spend time actually, I love this old way, I'd hate to have to give this up, but then go, yeah, but what's annoying about the current situation? Oh yeah, well, this is a bit annoying, the fact we have to do this and the fact we, you know, we need to be in, okay, so what would be better, right? Oh, well, this would be better. Oh, well, those things are given in the new world, but so it's flipping on its head. It's start with the old world, talk about the, you know, negative things as much as positive, because toxic positivity, you're right, it won't work with certain people, and it's more detrimental than anything. So, you know, so if anyone watching this, you should hire me and Csaba to come in as a double act. That way we're bringing toxic positivity and not so toxic negativity. No, I'm joking.
I mean, it's a perfect combination, but once you mentioned that you like bruising egos, then definitely I thought, okay, that's not toxic positivity. Okay. So that was a reference to the pain and gain, because sometimes people get too excited and they want to sugarcoat everything. And that's not ideal, because that's not about embracing reality. We have to know how much progress we made, but also how far away we are. So we need a fine balance.
And I think on the same point, you know, I totally agree with you. And I think that therefore it's very, very important for leaders or whoever is leading this transformation or change and leading people through it. It is to be honest about the duration and complexity of it. You know, in a world that is characterized by instant gratification, we often skip steps. And you know what Faris was talking about at the very beginning of the session, how important it is to break the process down in these smaller components and understand them and talk about them. It is important to also go through those stages without skipping any of the steps, to simply create an illusion of progress or of speed. Because at the end of the day, I feel that that is what then bites us back later, or we pay a very high price for that later. And this is damaging not only to that particular initiative, which we are trying to implement within the organization, but I think for the change management in general, because if 7, again, using that same stat of the 70%, if 7 out of 10 change initiatives fail, that already creates another one of those, another one of incomplete process, pain. We skip some steps, we create a big, fireworks about how exciting it's going to be, how our life is going to, become easier and more and better here. But then nothing gets really brought to closure, or nothing really then sets within our, BAU stage as well. And so I think it really is important to be very honest about the complexity of it as well, because honesty and transparency, I really feel, are the absolute essential components of this work. And all of us, and we've said that many times during this conversation alone, we have been through a number of professional and personal pieces of change and transformations. And we know that in the thick of it, in the thick of the process, it can get dark and it can get sticky. So telling us otherwise, or trying to motivate us out of that, darkness and stickiness, for toxic positivity, to use that term, is actually, I feel, demeaning to our, lived experiences and to our intelligence. So it is important to be honest with people, and to not treat them like they've never been part of change, and no, this is going to be great. Yeah, it is important to treat people as intelligent beings for who this is not the first rodeo.
That's where the framework is important, and what Faris mentioned, that we need components, because like one of the motivational speakers mentioned, that life is not a marathon, it's a series of sprints. So when you break it down into sprints, then it's much more manageable. Like, I was watching an interview with one of the marathon runners in the UK, and they asked her, so how do you run? Is it not boring? And then she said, I always run to the next rubbish bin only. I said, okay, so it's always the next one. And that's how you keep going, but a series of small sprints, and that's more manageable.
And this is the thing, also when we look at the change process, and sometimes we take that one piece of process and we extend it to the whole change duration, be it a year or 2 years, and then it really feels like each of those stages are very, very clunky. But I think, again, it's very, very important, whether we take the Kotter's 8 forces or any other change framework, I really feel that those steps or those components, we should be treating them as a sprint, as you say, and we should be, and there will be many times that we will return to the beginning, where we need to gain buy-in and commitment, or recontract with the most important, stakeholders or people who will be most impacted by this change. And we go through it again, and we go through it again, and we do that on multiple times, not just get buy-in, May 2024, and then expect that by May 2026, when this needs to be delivered, that everything is going to be still set in stone in the same way. And so, as we are coming very swiftly to the close of our session, and again, once again, the time, the hour has absolutely trickled by, or flown by rather. And for the final question, I'll ask you to just, reflect on perhaps how to make change stick and make it sustainable. We've talked about the buy-in, we've talked about the emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence as forces to really that need to be considered in this process. We've talked about, barriers and those kinds of things, but kind of like, how do we make it sustainable? How do we make it stick? If you had to give a brief piece of advice on that.
Just good luck. No. Yeah. First of all, make it fun, right? And just go all in. If you're a leader, treat it like a full-time job, right? I know you don't want to hear that, but if you're not willing to do it, don't do the change, because it requires that level of curation, attention, and just supporting, right? Just listen to your people and give them what they need at those moments. So in each of those, running to each bin, listen to what the challenge is to get to the next bin and give it, and don't assume that's going to that they will keep that challenge. They might need the next bin is something different, and the next bin is something different. So keep that mindset, and you'll be a much better at making change stick.
To see, the bin is a crucial part of change, but also my advice would be not to talk about change and transformation, because often the experts get really excited about it. That's so good. But what people on the other side hear is that I'm not good enough. It's going to be a lot of hassle and pain. Fantastic. That's motivating. And then you expect them to pay you just to make them feel like that. So that's why we always talk about leveling up, evolving, because that implies a level of continuity. You're not starting from scratch, but you carry on, and you don't have to level up because you're not good enough. It's because you can be even better. And I think it's surprisingly a more positive approach, because when you have to start from scratch, it's always a hassle, gaining momentum. Just like, when you launch the space shuttle, I think within the first 90 seconds, they used 90% of the fuel. That's insanely difficult and energy consuming, starting over. But leveling up, continuously evolving, I think that's more energy efficient. And also, we can stick to what we said. Just walk every day a little bit so you don't have to run tomorrow.
Great pieces of advice. And I would also say, just, reframe what change means, so that it's not this big thing that we now need to mobilize for an attack, but that this is this, friend, or maybe a little bit of unpleasant neighbor who's going to be here, and he's going to co-occupy this space with us. And whether we like it or not, we need to find a common language with this person or with this entity. So we need to just lean into it, and we need to do what we got to do. We need to develop our skills. We need to communicate. We need to share the vision. We need to break down, the process in smaller pieces, and all that stuff. But do the moaning, do the ranting, but this kind of neighbor is not going anywhere. This person is squatting here, or this entity is squatting here, and we need to live with that, and we just need to execute. So thank you so much, both of you, for all of your insights, for all of your case studies, for all of your positivity that you have brought to this session today. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate everyone who's joined us here today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing your thoughts in the chat, and we will be looking forward to welcoming you back here again next time, because I don't think that change as a topic is off the agenda, and we will be bringing it back to the table again, and again finding a different lens and different take on it that we find is coming up in our works, the people and leaders are asking us, or we are experiencing in the environments that we feel is important to also bring in this setting as well. So thank you very much all. Any last words? You're welcome to share. Otherwise, you'll have to keep silent.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Excellent.